Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, and the effervescent Evan Ginsberg. But two of my other favorite, often guest hosts here on the show is Benny Scala and Nikita Brezhnikov. Haven't had you on since show number 200. We're on 225 tonight. So
wow.
It's been a long time. Yeah, it's been about half a year. So really have missed your presence. So here we are as a group, a lot of things to talk about or nothing to talk about. That's when we're our best, is when there's little content and many opinions to throw out. So, one thing that I was reminded just before the show started, and as the background that Benny has is of Ray Stevens, one thing I was reminded about is that in 2020 on this date is when Pat Patterson died.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I just, for us here in San Francisco, Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens were basically like the Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan of the Bay Area. They were the ones that I grew up on watching and like really admiring, him and the High Chief Peter Maivia and Rocky Johnson and Ivan Putski, and that was really like the Superstar Billy Graham. That was really like the heart of like what I grew up watching. But really, Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens were the headliners on every major card here in the Bay Area. So it's a little tough because his legacy isn't exactly so wonderful, coming out over time. And yet as a wrestler, if you can just encapsulate what he did on the mat, he was just an amazing wrestler. What do you guys have to say about the life and times of Pat Patterson?
I think he did a good job saying it all there.
He was Vince's right-hand man. Pat was smart. He knew how to get himself in there. He was a good worm. And he was smart with what he did, but everybody says, "Oh, he had a great mind for wrestling." It's fucking wrestling. You don't need a great mind, like they say. Kevin Sullivan and this one. What the fuck? You get the right guys. Anybody can put it together. You need the angle. You got to carry it out. But Pat could do what the people can't do today. Tell the story in the ring.
Right.
That's it. And he wasn't a big guy. He carried 245 compared to the average Joe on the street. That's big, but he wasn't no hulking man. But yet he could go against Mosca and look like he could beat his ass legitimately. Pat Patterson and Bob Backlund had the greatest steel cage match of all time. September 24th of 79 in the Garden. You can't beat it. It was drama. It was like, oh my God, the whole time. It was smart. That's it. The man he could tell a story in the ring. I just wish they would have done more with Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson in the WWF, but it just wasn't enough time. He came in for the Snuka angle. That was great, but then he didn't really do much else.
Yeah. No, all that was in the Bay Area when when it was Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. That was a real Bay Area special. And those guys, I remember seeing them fight the Medics when I was a very little kid. And that was something that blew me away. That was something that made me fall in love with wrestling, and I'm still in love with it today. So it's that kind of thing.
The parade that came around, Rocky Johnson, who used to work with Pat on the West Coast, he brought Saito in to work with Fuji because I think Tanaka had enough of Fuji shit. He didn't want to deal with it anymore. And then all the other people that came in, Maeva was already here, though. We had him in 77. But it was a whole crew that came in. Buddy Rose, that was great. Buddy Rose was a pretty good guy out there, not just Portland. It's like Stasiak. He just won the belt, right? A couple of days ago, Evan and Benny. Yesterday. The day before yesterday.
First, right?
No, today's the second. It was yesterday. So it's like, but in Portland, you couldn't find a bigger face than Stasiak. And it's like in the East Coast. And then he and Chief would team up in Toronto in 1977, 3 months in a row. It's like what we didn't know back then. But you know what? It was good.
Benny, what are your thoughts on Pat Patterson? Because I'm sure you saw.
Well, I was gonna say something about Stevens because I became a fan in 1968, and one of the very first wrestling magazines I bought, and of course I knew all about Bruno, but Bruno traveled to San Francisco, and Ray Stevens beat him 2 out of 3 falls, which I thought like wow, and I guess at the time there was at least there in San Francisco there was a controversy over whether or not Stevens won the championship because he won, I guess, 1 fall by pinfall and 1 by countout, I think.
And since it didn't count, yeah, the countout one.
But I mean, I don't think Bruno did that too many times, did he, Nikita? Put anybody over like that?
No, because we didn't know it. You know that? So much, just like with the big Backlund and Inoki thing 2 days ago. It's like we didn't know these things. But there was no internet. There was, unless you had a friend like I'd call you or Evan and say, "What happened last night in the garden?" That's it. And if your parents found that, you made a long distance call, they'd break your neck.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, oh shit. So yeah, we were in the dark back then, and I loved it. I think it was better.
Evan, what are your thoughts on Pat?
Patterson's one of my top 20 all-time favorites. One of the few just as great face or heel. Piper wasn't as great a face as he was a heel, and a lot of these guys, it was either or, not both. Patterson was great, what he did outside the ring, Vince's circus, sports alleged entertainment for the most part, I'm not as impressed with, and turning him and Briscoe into buffoons didn't really appeal to me, but in ring Patterson was amazing. As far as accusations and such, I'm not the one to say what wasn't or wasn't true, and so sometimes you have to take your heroes who are flawed human beings and separate the two. And in ring, the guy was as great as virtually anyone. And let me just throw this in, since you were talking about Stevens. Over the years, I've interviewed tons and tons of legends. Many of them cite Stevens. Prime Stevens is the greatest of all time. Greatest of all time. Others will say Buddy Rogers. Others will say Fez. Some will say Bruno for the sheer success of his run. But, when you talk about somebody out of thousands upon thousands of wrestlers as being the greatest of all time, as perceived by his peers, that's really amazing praise. Now, I saw Stevens in the WWF and in the AWA in the 80s, and he had lost a step or two, and he wasn't quite what he was, but it was still Ray Stevens. You saw glimpses of greatness, like when he was wrestling snooker or whatnot. But he didn't even get a shot at Backlund at the Garden. He did on some of the smaller shows. But so his star had kind of passed prior to the early 80s when he came into WWF.
Well, he
was a crazy bastard, according to Roy Shire. He scared him to death. Motorcycle riding, skydive. It's like, please, don't kill yourself. But he's like, he died. He
died at like 60 or 61, and that was like dog years. Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you bring up separating the artist from the art, and it kind of drifts into a discussion we should probably have about the Vince McMahon documentary. Now, I don't think Nikita's seen it. I don't know if you have, Benny, or not.
Yeah, I saw it. It was a couple of months ago, I guess, whenever it first came out.
Okay, yeah, and it's always, Vince is always on everyone's mind somewhere in, the realm of wrestling. And so even though, Nikita, you haven't seen the documentary, there's probably not a lot in there that would stun you. As far as to me, though,
that shit. I really don't. I mean, it's like, who cares?
Well, because it affected a lot of people. It did, and it's kind of like the truth about like Walt Disney. Everybody thought he was build all these wonderful like fantasy things, but then his head is, or maybe his body's frozen underneath Cinderella's castle or something like that.
Yet they drag the kids down and spend thousands of dollars at his theme park, and his family still gets rich. So it's all bullshit. Nobody really cares.
How about Jerry Lewis? There was a guy that, growing up, I absolutely loved the guy, with all his telethons and everything. And I read his biography, and he was a miserable human being.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
James Brown was one of my heroes. He was no Boy Scout.
Yeah, it's difficult. I wonder if, I know there are some people still that Vince is their hero and that, they really look, but do you think that all these allegations that have come out have changed anyone's mind about Vince McMahon? And so you don't have to really see the documentary. I'm asking more about like what you think public perception is about Vince McMahon, or do you feel that, people are in that mode where it's like, what, if you did what you could do to entertain us, we don't care what you do in your personal life. What do you guys think?
It's a 5-minute attention span. People forget about it as quick as you told them. It doesn't matter.
Benny, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, when we heard that he was going to be indicted, there was like about 700 podcasts that he was going to be indicted. There's none because he hasn't been indicted. People forgot about it already.
Yeah, what's your thought, Evan?
My thought is, if you are a billionaire, you take care of the legends and pioneers that help make you such. And these guys shouldn't need GoFundMes at the end to save their houses for, medical expenses, for burials. I think it's disgraceful. The NFL has a fund for their legends and pioneers. And these guys...
No, Evan. They had to fight John Mackey's wife, Sylvia, the number 88 clause. They turned their ass to him when she was begging for help because he was like Foley, he was all busted up in the head from football. The brain can't take that, helmet or not. They were like, no, it didn't happen from that. It's like, come on, he played pro football for 15 years. She had to go to court. Then, after they were forced, then they decided they were going to do the right thing. They were not benevolent.
I'm not saying the NFL is benevolent by any means, including their treatment going all the way down to the cheerleaders even who are exploited. But my point being that at least there's a fund in place at this point, and for the veterans, and you don't have that. I'm not saying it's a fortune by any means, but at least that there's some financial help for these guys.
Now, I've heard you say this many times. My question is this. It's the longest running television show in the history of TV, okay? So they're all SAG eligible. Why the hell aren't they in the SAG union and collecting that from the SAG people?
Because Vince won't let them. He won't let them join.
Vince has got no control over it.
Yeah, he does, because he's got them under independent contractor contracts, and so that's how he was able to have them designated as essential workers during the Florida lockdown, and they still work.
They are independent contractors, but if you're on television, and Vince wouldn't be paying a dime for that. It would be coming from the Screen Actors Guild, from the dues that you pay, that we all pay into it. So it's like, I don't know why that never materialized, probably because it would be a big cost for the Screen Actors Guild, and they probably told them take a hike. Everybody looks out for the buck. Like Johnny always used to say, the jingles rule the whole routine.
Benny, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I mean, I've always struggled with independent contractor. Are you really independent? Because you can't work for anybody else. So, why aren't you an employee? I think if you go onto the dictionary of an employee, don't they fit that?
Well, in California, we passed a law that makes them employees, which is causing a lot of controversy too, is that when you have that much control, when you say you can't post anything on your social media sites, when you say that, you can be called in to work a show on a holiday or, with less than 24 hours notice, or that you can be let go on less than 24 hours notice. They have people really dangling on a string in the WWE. And of course, the big question there is that a lot of people look at AEW as the alternative and say that's going things the other way, where the employees are so much in control that AEW is a shit show and can't really run themselves in an ordained fashion because they're so everything is so chaotic. I must have really ticked off Nikita there. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, do you think that AEW is kind of something going the other way, where the employees have so much control and Khan has so little control that it's ruining the product?
I think you have to find a happy medium. I think Tony Khan is too. I mean, I don't watch AEW, but everything I've heard is that he wants to be a buddy and not a boss. You need to be a leader. To the extent of Vince McMahon, I don't know, but
where is a happy medium? Has wrestling ever? And I brought this up a few shows ago. Do you have to be a jerk to be a wrestling promoter? But do you? Is the big question, because there really isn't. I can't think. Maybe you could talk to some territory situations, like we've got I've got my friend Butch Haw, who runs Wrestling for Charity here in the Bay Area, and we've got some other friends of ours who do local promotions, but to try to run something on a national basis, does it really warrant? We see Tony Khan's version of stuff, which hasn't fully worked, and we see what the WWE has done, and we're not really sure how this new organization is really going to run the WWE. I mean, is Triple H really the guy that's fully in charge right now, or what? I haven't really gotten the clear message, and I'm not sure if you guys know the difference.
You pretty much answered your own question. If you let the show run itself and you don't put the clamps down on people, then it turns into a shit mess. You all heard about Vince Sr. Everybody thought he was a wonderful guy, but nobody crossed him, right? Because you know why? You'd be out the door. Very simple. Businessman. All the bean counters that were running Capital Wrestling, all worrying about the money. So it was like, we got to do it this way. That's it. If you don't like it, then you leave. But yeah, you got to be somewhat of an asshole. That's just the way it's got to be. You know why? I said this about Heroes of Wrestling recently on Monte and the Pharaoh. It's like you let guys walk all over you, and that was the purpose that thing fell apart. There wasn't anybody that had the big steel balls like everybody says Chief was such an asshole as an agent. It's like, you have to be, because you're dealing with assholes. I came from a 27-year career with the police, and all those years in wrestling, those are the two biggest fuck-ups I've ever seen that will fuck up a good thing for themselves. Nobody else fucks it up. They do. And Nikolai would back me up 1,000% on that, because he'd sit there sometimes and say, you know what? I got the money in my pocket. I got a house. I got everything. What the fuck did they do with their money? Everybody has the same shot. If you
yes
didn't
and
say
no.
that,
Yes and no. Johnny Valiant never broke $100,000. Nikolai did 4 times as much. That's a big difference.
Nikolai didn't get $100,000, but Johnny, he got the screw job. Okay, just when and plus he had divorced, Evan, you know that. It's like, that hurts. But then all of a sudden, he's not booked anymore. Just when he buys a house. Isn't that fucking wonderful? Vince's old buddy from military school. And it's like, nobody, who could talk better than Johnny Valiant? I got nothing against Bobby Heenan, but I think Johnny was his equal easily. If you let him run, you give him the ball, he'll show you what he can do with it. But he was suppressed. I don't know why. He must have pissed. Well, I got a feeling Johnny wasn't in with the clique. The clique was running things, and if you weren't in the clique, you could be the greatest thing in the world, and they just ain't going to use you, man.
Johnny Valiant, to the day he died, he did not know why he was let go. Vince was his buddy in military school, and he said to me, his theory was that he was not scared of Vince because they went back that far, and most of the wrestlers were, so Vince didn't have that power over him. That was his theory, but he said to me, I never broke $100,000. So the idea that, quote, they all pissed it away on Wine, Women, and Song is bullshit, because, you're making a decent living, but you're supporting a family back home. You're on the road 300 plus days a year, and it's not a fortune of money, and there's taxes and everything else. So, it's the fans who are 500 wrestling books and 5,000 shoot interviews in, who think they understand it. They didn't live it. They making under $100,000 and supporting yourself and a family back home is not a fortune of money.
Well, Davey O'Hannon said that, like, DiNucci never made $100,000.
That's what I'm saying.
Aaron
Absolutely.
Cicluna, any of those guys, and he wound up getting those guys jobs with, I think, the New York Times?
New York Times.
Yeah.
They had some stability finally.
And benefits, which
Right.
they should have had, wrestling 300 plus days a year. So Vince Sr. did not spread the money around. Johnny Valiant and the Valiant brothers were headline. What's that?
No, I didn't say he did.
Yeah, Johnny Valiant,
he was in charge,
would get four figures for headlining Madison Square Garden. Do you think Rod Stewart or Elton John or Mick Jagger, who were headlining Madison Square Garden, worked for four figures? I mean, come on. The Valiant brothers headlined the Garden 3 times in a year, right, Nikita?
Yeah. And they could have kept on going too, probably.
He got a couple $1,000. He didn't break 10 grand. He told me Bruno got 8 grand. So, but Bruno was doing 250 grand in the 70s. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the Valiants did not.
So why do you think they took the belt off of Pedro?
Of who?
Pedro
Off of
Morales. I mean, he couldn't hold it forever. And remember, they were doing that
He
thing
wasn't
where
holding it forever, Benny. It
No,
wasn't
yeah,
that long.
He wasn't drawing as well outside of New York.
That's it. That's it, because in Baltimore, the summer of '73 was Bobo. They brought Bobo. And Pedro worked the same night, put in a little bullshit place. If you're the top man, you're going to work a 12,000-seat arena like Baltimore Civic Center. He just wasn't drawing. Boston, he was dead. Philadelphia should have been okay, but some of the attendance I was seeing, like they were testing Bruno, and I don't think Bruno wanted to be bothered with it, because he was in Indianapolis at the time with Dick the Bruiser. They were tag champions, and
Right.
I really give Bruno credit for Johnny and Jimmy not discovering them, but when he saw what they could do, it's like a couple of months later, after he got the belt, he brings them to the WWF, and it's like, oh, sure, why not? It made good sense. Pedro hung around for a while, but I guess it had to be hard.
Well,
You know?
let me throw this theory out to you too. Is that as Pedro Morales was kind of getting, while he was champion, wrestling kind of took a bigger turn towards the more beefed up, sculpted type individual wrestlers than it did like the side of beef type of wrestlers. And Pedro Morales, things were going the superstar Billy Graham type of,
Oh, Russ, he didn't come around until '75.
I know. And at that point,
Mike McCord was supposed to be the bodybuilder, and he was fat, believe me.
Right.
Strong as an ox, but he wasn't cut up like Superstar was.
In the late 70s and early 80s, you had the transition to the, to the Hulk Hogan's and the, Jesse the Body Venturas and
yeah, that was the 80s, but Pedro, you have to remember, back in the 70s, and I was at the Garden pretty much every month from 74 to 85 until Vince went full kiddie show and circus. Pedro was the hero of the Puerto Rican community and the Hispanic fans. And it was very ethnic back then. You had the Polish strongman, Ivan Putski. You had the Italian Superman, Bruno, and of course, Danucci. You had, et cetera, so on, So
you had the German, Irish, and Russian, German, Russian heels, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
And the Japanese heels.
The Japanese,
Because
right.
It hadn't been that long since World War II.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Those guys like my father, what World War II veterans sitting in the stands in the 70s. So they hated the Japanese and the German heels. But my point being,
what can you do today having to draw heat? Everybody would pick it and say, oh, well, that's not politically correct. It's like, who gives a fuck? It's drawing the fans, you asshole. We want to see them come
you have to stomp on a friendship bracelet like, McIntyre and CM Punk.
Can you even do that? It's like, homos are like, and they used to shoot from the hip, and some of the things they said, today, it would never make it onto the air. And they didn't cuss. It's just you can't be that nasty. Isn't it funny?
You can't be that racial. You can't. You certainly can't bring up.
But I'm not talking about like the traditional racism. Anything, even like that Canadian goofy fucking like Bret Hart thing. It's like, come on, us against Canada. Stop it. That's ridiculous. Who cares about that? That's
my point with Pedro was there was a much bigger Puerto Rican population in New York than in some of the other cities, and that's one of the reasons he drew much bigger in New York. We loved him in New York. I mean,
did he not lose? I heard he never lost a title match at the Garden. Is that correct?
Well, he lost by technicality. Yeah, but Bruno tried to give him the rub coming into the ring that night. But I think Pedro was a better intercontinental champion. Look at it, him and Morocco. They look like they're beating the piss out of each other. I mean, those are some battles. And Patera, like it's coming up on the 8th when Pedro beat Patera, and that night, Evan. So, oof. Well, you never forget that.
I think Pedro was a very good champion. He just had impossible shoes to fill after Bruno.
Yeah, that's a good point. What, Russ, you don't know December the 8th? John Lennon.
Okay. That was that. I forget it was. I remember watching Monday Night Football. So that's how I heard the announcement. Was from Howard Cosell announcing it to everybody, which,
I'll tell you what happened. I was at the Garden. It was Slaughter against Bruno on top. Backlund was in Japan. He missed a rare card. And, the show ends around 11 o'clock. I walk outside, and it was like this weird buzz in the air, like a murmur. And I walked up to an absolute stranger and said, "What happened?" And they go, "John Lennon was shot." We didn't know he was dead yet. There was no internet. This is 1980. And there was actually a book the night John Lennon was killed, and they told my story in there, coming out of the wrestling at the Garden and just feeling it in the air. And it was horrible. And, he was 40 years old, and he had adopted New York as his home. And we were ashamed that it happened here. It was outside the Dakota on 72nd Street, Central Park West. So, so that you'll never forget that night.
Benny, what about you?
I was. I heard it from Howard Cosell. I forget who was playing. I just remember it was Monday Night Football.
The Jets were playing.
The Patriots. Yep.
Patriots, yeah. And
it's on YouTube, yeah.
But I saw him 6 years earlier It was Thanksgiving Day, 1974, and me and three of my friends went to the Garden to see Elton John, and Murray the K was the MC, and he said, and I think the opening band was Kiki D Band. And I guess they collaborated later on for a couple of hits, but Murray said we have a surprise guest, and when he said John Lennon, I have never heard such applause either before or nothing even remotely close to what happened in Madison Square Garden when he said the name John Lennon. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
We're getting old, boys, because I'm hearing just today that Elton John's probably ready to go. It's sad, but yeah.
No, I mean 2024, and we'll be getting to that later on this month. Has been an incredible loss of some amazing folks. Well, we're going to get all solemn about that towards the end of the year. But as long as we're on the memory lane, I did want to bring up we just had Survivor Series on over the weekend. And I wanted to just see if you guys had any, even if you didn't see the Survivor Series, which I'm not sure. I think Evan and I have.
I saw it.
Yeah, I don't know if Benny has.
I saw it.
Okay. But I first wanted to start off with just any other Survivor Series memories that you guys have in particular, or what might be your favorite Survivor Series match that you can think of.
It's all a blur. I mean, I remember in the early days we actually cared. It seemed to mean something. There were the 4 major pay-per-views, and you looked forward to it, and you cared about the teams. And now they don't even have a traditional Survivor Series match. They had 2 War Games matches.
Oh yeah, and the singles matches in between.
And with that thought, I watched the Spectrum November 25th, Thanksgiving 1982 show. So there's my Survivor Series, and I loved it. I've seen it 100 times, and I still love it.
Okay. Well, in what particular match, though? What particular
Survivor Series? I look at some of the recently on Facebook or whatever, somebody's been posting some of the behind the scenes bullshit that you're not supposed to be seeing, but you're seeing. And it looked like a comedy routine. And we're like, Rob. It's like, they never used to do that back in the 70s. You didn't have to. You didn't have to overact or push it too far. All you had to do was come out and be you, and it was going to work.
Really, that's what the kids love, though. That's what they
yes.
The next generation after us seems to care more about the the build up to it. It used to be the 5-minute promo and the 25-minute match. Now you have the 25-minute promo and the 5-minute match. So
is there blood anymore?
Shrinking everything down.
Occasionally.
Really? I mean, how the hell do you go into a steel cage and nobody bleeds? That's weird.
Well, it is if everybody hits the cage with this much of an arm's length before they actually get contact with the cage. The women's match, it's a decent segue. I did want to say this, is that, and I know not everybody's completely up with the WWE right now, but I just want to make this point, that Nia Jax, to me, is becoming the female Dalip Singh. As far as the more she wrestles, the worse she looks in the ring. I don't know how she continues to regress throughout her career, but somehow she has, because her performance in that War Games cage was kindergarten-like. I mean, she was pawing at people with missing them by 4 or 5 feet.
Somebody's got to if those women are going to use chairs, somebody has to teach them how to do a chair shot. They were atrocious, especially hers. They were awful.
They were really embarrassing.
Posted that. Yeah, it was sad.
For someone that's been in wrestling as long as she has been in wrestling, to you got to at least go through the. Now, first of all, having her come in as the first participant was a really, really bad idea. because she's not capable of just being one-on-one with somebody and making it look good. And she blew up in like the first minute and a half before even like any of the other wrestlers could come in, before the females could come in. She was already looking like she needed to, like, you know, take a nap, you know?
Really?
And when you have a cage match, you can't hide somewhere. You can't like take although she managed to. And the part where why didn't you just start the match with all the stupid weaponry in the ring? What was the point in having all the stuff underneath the ring so that they would run to the ring in this sense of urgency and then spend another minute and a half running around the perimeter of the ring trying to find
where's that garbage can?
Yeah, where's the garbage can? Just start with it already in the ring. What's the point? I didn't understand the point of making them go find stuff other than but by the time the first women's match, quote unquote, started, I checked the time on it is 43 minutes. Okay? 43 minutes. Lou Thez looks at something like that and goes, come on, you know, at least you could have had something like actually happening, something really happening in that ring for 43 minutes. They were just pretty much pawing at each other till the actual quote unquote start of the match. And then the match itself was pretty much just crazy. But yet the fans were saying this is awesome. They were going crazy for it. And it does make me stand up and go, what the hell is wrong with me? Because I thought it was garbage.
It's awesome.
I thought you don't know any better. It's awesome. Because I have no idea who you're talking about. I've never seen these people. But if this is what their standard is, then people love it. What were they wearing? Were they wearing provocative outfits? Because I don't watch it.
No. That's not that.
But two women battling, like we used to see, they were one-piece bathing suits, technically, is what Ann Casey said they wore. And I know Ann Casey could probably break both my arms if she was still here, but they could get it done, you know, and we believed it. Were they exploited? Hell yeah, they were exploited. Because women wrestling, you know, it was supposed to be like hot thing. Even though they felt like they were athletes, and they were great athletes. But, you know, in Baltimore one night, there was more women on the card than men. Isn't that wild? Because they really felt like
the WWE, or it turns out I probably watch more intensely the women's matches than a lot of the men's matches, just because the truth is I know a number of them, so they're friends of mine.
10 women in the ring did not work, though. There were too many botched spots, and you know, there was one shot where I saw Io Sky with a chair in her hand, and I guess she was in the second ring, and I guess she was getting ready to go into the first ring, but all of a sudden she laid back down again. I guess it wasn't her turn.
Wait a minute. How many rings, Benny?
There were two. It was the War Games thing.
Oh, like they did in Los Angeles. They used to have the 2-ring battle royal. That was
but it was enclosed in a cage.
But somebody must have given her a signal. You can't go in yet, so she had to lay down again.
Now, did any of these women get cut in the cage?
No.
No, I didn't think so.
One handcuffing. That's about all you got.
Handcuffing?
Yeah. But the whole thing was it was a weapons match. So they had like tables. They had tables and chairs and handcuffs and fire extinguishers and garbage cans. And, you know, but they had to go under the ring to get the stuff. It wasn't just all in there in the ring to start with. So
it would have been much more entertaining if they used pillows instead of chairs, though. They didn't know how to use those chairs.
No, the chair shots were pathetic. And again, it's just, you know, how many table spots have you seen in your lifetime? I mean, table use after ECW pretty much has all been superfluous. Once, you know, ECW pretty much did everything that human beings could do to each other with a table, right? In the ECW. And so since then, I don't get much entertainment out of table, ladder, chair matches myself. I don't find them that intriguing. I'd rather see, you know, people really prove it in the ring with holds and moves and finishers and so forth, and building a story in the ring, that just how many spots can you do featuring a chair?
Yeah, there was not much of that at all.
No. And like they would put two ladies would put one of them on a chair, and the amount of setup time for it, and just the obviousness of just like the lady like scooting her back so that she's right there in the center of the chairs, and then waiting to do the spot till she's right perfectly situated. You know,
well, this is what lost somebody like me from, as I said, when it was real. The obvious, you see what's coming. Okay, especially when they run the ropes or when they telegraph a move. It's like,
hold on a sec. Who's this? Who is this?
That's Miss Bree. She's a big wrestling fan.
Oh, we're all big fans of.
Probably do a better job.
Yes,
absolutely.
Evan, you're gonna have to get your cat on the show.
Yeah, I would rather watch Benny's dog than Nia Jax for an hour. Seriously,
I agree. Absolutely.
I'm with you on that. Now,
you know, Evan, just a couple days ago, you posted, who's your favorite all-time tag team? And I said, Joe Turco and Pancho Valdez, they probably be better than any of the shit you see anymore. You know, it's like,
yeah,
they were good.
I enjoyed the Bloodline War Games. That was a good match. But
that was not bad, yes.
But that opening match with the women, it was like, it felt endless. It was stultifying. I was numb by the end of it.
Stultifying is the perfect word. I thought that word myself while I was watching it. Like,
and speaking of botched spots, when you were watching Nakamura and LA Knight, and LA Knight is wildly overrated. He's yet to have a great match in WWE. Knight is supposedly slamming Nakamura's head on the ring apron, and he's missing by a foot, and the cameraman's probably so numb. It took him like half a minute to cut away from it. His head was so far from the mat, it was exposing the business with each shot. It was ridiculous.
I saw that because they were not, it was good clickbait. You know, the show is like, how ridiculous. It was unbelievable.
And you wanted to like that match. The problem that I have is that going into it, I was like, hey, that actually seems like a pretty good match on the card. Usually you can count on Nakamura to take any match and raise it a level. But I think Nakamura is just like, you know, hey, they're paying me for this, and I'm just going to give them, you know, absolutely C-level performance as long as they're giving me this inner, you know. And I personally am not a fan of the U.S. title. I think it could totally be eliminated. I would also get rid of the WWE title, although I do think Gunther is making a good effort of making that
he's
title.
He's the best guy they have.
Yeah, he's making that title mean something more than it's meant for a long time. But I am just a fan of, like, you know, the world's heavyweight, intercontinental, and tag team titles.
WWE has 18 titles. 18.
And AEW has like 47 titles.
You could put $1 million cash in front of me right now. I couldn't tell you who the 18 champions are in WWE. It's absurd.
I couldn't even name the title belts. I don't even know like what actual all their titles are.
As we speak, though, they're having tournaments for a women's US and a women's IC champion.
Well, before you were talking about fans yelling, "This is awesome." These money marks, if they're spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a religious pilgrimage to these mediocre pay-per-views, you know, they're going to sell belts to these guys for $300, $400, $500 a pop. They're going to make as many belts as possible. And it's just merchandising, because I don't care about the U.S. title. I don't care if they add more women's titles or whatnot. All I want to see is great wrestling. And ultimately what happens on these pay-per-views is you're numb by the middle of it. And then Cody or Gunther or Reigns comes out and has a very good match and kind of salvages the evening. Kind of. That's what happens.
I was surprised how quick the LA Knight Nakamura match went. It wasn't really a squash match, but it was pretty one-sided, and it was done and over with very quickly.
Instantly forgettable.
sadly, but true. And I mean, Nakamura deserves better than that. That's, you know, if you're
He
gonna
hasn't been for a few years.
but if you're going to
He's
spend that
posting.
much time on a terrible women's match, you know, book out more time for Nakamura to at least kind of shine a little bit. I mean, there could have been, as I think the booking on it was real soft, and that they deserve better than that, especially because the women's match was so bad. And Nikita,
You've already hit on it. You've already hit on it. It's all merchandising. It's got nothing to do with fucking wrestling. It's got to do with merchandising. The wrestling is to push the merchandise. Period. What merchandise did we have in the 70s, Evan? A program and a black and white 8x10. That would be it.
maybe homemade T-shirts. You know, people that made their own
No, we
T-shirts.
didn't really have that yet. And you get that through the magazines, but now it's just to push the merchandise. So they don't give a fuck because they know.
Benny
they
knows all about the
have
magazines.
the audience. They'll be there.
Benny, you know all about the magazines, right?
Oh yeah,
You were
Yeah.
you were a huge fan.
absolutely. Love the magazines. I'm in one of them. November
Yes.
1969, The Wrestler. I'm in the pen pal section.
The pen
Wow.
pal.
Well,
And that was legitimate. That was no bullshit.
I got about 7 pen pals within a couple of weeks. Yeah, it was legit.
That was our internet.
Yeah.
What a different world, though. Like somebody actually would put the home addresses of 12 and 13-year-old kids in a magazine. Can't do that now.
And the apartment wrestling on a lot of the covers. And of course, what the hell was that? Because
All the great ads, the advertisements with the X-ray glasses. Remember those? Like,
I always think of the X-ray glasses, buddy. That's the best.
and Count Dante and his deadly art of kung fu.
karate, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the depth
Oh,
touch.
Atlas.
Yeah.
You're gonna be a big man. You don't need any weights. Just do the dynamic tension.
Is that
Right.
Joe
I
Reader?
do that after I eat some lasagna, I'll do dynamic tension in the shit house. But I don't grow big muscles from it.
So yeah. So anyway, I wanted to just see if you guys had any other pressing things that you wanted to talk
I
about.
thought
wrestling.
the Intercontinental Championship match was pretty decent.
It was actually right.
Sheamus and what's his name, Ludwig Kaiser, and I thought I was kind of disappointed with the Gunther match. First of all, I mean, I've been there, done that with Damian Priest. I would have liked to have seen Gunther go over clean. I don't like to see him get tainted victories. It seems like they're doing something with his character, where they're kind of making him vulnerable, and I'm not sure why.
I think because they realize he's probably more of a fan favorite than a heel at this point, and
Is
so
there a difference?
that's a good point. I kind of get from Gunther sort of a Killer Kowalski vibe.
Very much so. I think you could put him in a time machine, transport him back to the early 70s, and he could have fought Pedro or Bruno and given a good match. I just, I don't know why they're messing with this character. The character is great. I mean, would they have turned Waldo Von Erich back in the 70s? I don't think so. Would that have worked?
No, but we have people who again their background is in kids entertainment and in soap operas. That's where they do their writing.
I think they have a really good thing with Gunther. I just hope they don't mess it up.
They will. Trust me, they'll find a way to
It's always been a soap opera, or you'd have two men fighting in their underwear. So you had to have a storyline. So that's fine. I don't have any problem with the soap opera, but have some meaning to the soap opera.
I remember in 350 Days, his name is Howard Jerome, I think.
Yeah.
When he said there's a longing in the human heart to see good triumph over evil. And I think wrestling's completely lost that side of that. And that's what made it so enjoyable for us.
I think
society has changed. I've as someone older, and we're all not kids, I find it amazing that, corporate vultures are heroes today. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was fight the power, you don't want to be the man or whatnot. Today, these guys are heroes, and it's like I don't get it. Young people have changed the way they perceive the world. They want to be the CEOs. They want to be the corporate, kingpins, and so it's kind of like the bottom line as opposed to.
Well, it's weird. I would say that it's sort of that way with the male talent, but with the female talent, the underdogs are actually like, people like them a lot more than they like the women that are, seeming like they're, better than everybody else. Like a Bailey, for instance, gets over so much because she is like, not a superstar or super diva-ish or anything like that. Whereas the divas wind up, the ones that are so ultra good looking wind up being the heel. Not all the time, but I think that's it. It's different what is perceived as a trait that you find that the younger folks are finding admirable in the male talent, they don't like to see in the female talent. I don't know. That's just my
Nikita's is absolutely right. It's all about money because Liv Morgan, who is like, I think the drizzling shits in the ring, but she obviously makes them a lot of money. So they put her over Nia Jax, who weighs 3 times what she does. I made a joke on my podcast that, when you would go to the amusement park and you go on the rides, must be this tall to ride. Liv Morgan she's not that tall. I mean, yet she's beating a 275-pound woman, and we're supposed to, believe that for a second.
But she's the dateless wonder's imaginary girlfriend, so she's selling a ton of merch, and that's basically it, really.
That's good, Evan.
She's no wrestler.
Professional blind date. That's what Johnny used to use that line. Professional blind date.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway, guys, we're running at the end of the hour here, so just wanted to have you guys promote what you like to promote and give you guys, if you want people to get a hold of you by social media, what you'd like to have them get a hold of you.
Facebook for me, I'm an old timer. That's the only place I am, and that's good enough. And that's getting to be a pain in the ass. They change stuff, but that's where I am. Or when it was real. You want to know about wrestling? The 70s. That's it.
Buy that book if you're smart.
Thank you, Benny.
Or even if you're not smart, buy it and get smart, right?
Well, it'll tell you about what happened and maybe help people understand some things. Why us old timers can't let go. It's like a dog bit into a piece of raw meat. We can't let go of it. 60, 50 years later, we still talk about it. We argue about it. But no, I won't argue about wrestling. I never will do that. It saved my life many times. I love it. I'll always love it. Better than sex and cheaper.
Benny, go ahead and tell the fans.
Every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, Dan and Benny in the Ring. Tomorrow night we have wrestling historian George Shire, and I do. I do a true crime show most Mondays. So in 2 weeks we have the case of John Benet Ramsey, which is now coming back into prominence with the Netflix docuseries.
What are you going to do about that, Benny? Who are you going to interview?
What's that? No, it's going to be a panel thing, and we have a live chat, and everybody kind of gives their opinions. Actually, Dan Sebastiano, my co-host on Dan and Benny in the Ring, did a master's dissertation on the case, and I didn't even know. He told me that today. He said, he said, I have an idea for you for the true crime show, and I said, all right, I'm all ears, and so yeah, he did a lot of research on the case.
Let's talk another time because, what my experience, and Son of Sam is a great topic.
Oh,
it
yeah,
really is.
Absolutely.
Berkowitz. So, yeah, that's a...
you talk about a guy who had the New York City, in total fright for, 2 summers?
Yeah, and Superstar against Bruno, August the 1st of 77. That was his last murder. That wasn't him, though, Berkowitz. Part of a game. We'll get into that later. But, yep, that rounds into wrestling, believe me. Just like Lenin, you walk out of the garden. Wrestling is involved in I talk to lawyers, doctors, and you can't believe how many, they don't always say it, but when you get them off to the side, it's a part of their life too.
And Evan, why don't you promote your page?
Evan Ginsberg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook. Check out 350 Days. Check out Wrestling Then and Now with Killer Kowalski, Nikolai Volkov, and Nikita Brezhnikov.
Hey, what's going on with that, Evan? I see the Dwayne's posting more about it. That it's going to like fade off, or but it's available.
No. It's on Tubi and Plex, and what he said was it's amazing it hasn't faded off because lots of people are watching it.
Oh, they
absolutely. And if you listeners out there have holiday viewing and you're like stuck watching a terrible football game or a terrible basketball game, go watch Wrestling Then and Now. Go watch 350 Days. Go get a copy of The Wrestler and watch it over again. You'll be glad that you did. Anyway, guys, thanks for being on the show this week, and good to see you all again. Happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
Good night.
Happy holidays.